If you enjoy the content on this channel, please like and subscribe. Four Weddings and a Funeral is a 1994 British romantic comedy film directed by Mike Newell. It is the first of several films by screenwriter Richard Curtis to star Hugh Grant and follows the adventures of Charles, played by Grant, and his circle of friends through a number of social occasions as each of them encounter a romance. Andie MacDowell co-stars as Charles's love interest Carrie with Kristin Scott Thomas, James Fleet, Simon Callow, John Hannah, Charlotte Coleman, David Bower, Corin Redgrave and Rowan Atkinson in supporting roles. The film was made in 6 weeks and cost under £3 million and became an unexpected success and the highest grossing British film in history at the time, with a worldwide box office of $245 million and receiving an Academy Award nominations for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. Additionally, Grant won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy and the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role, and the film won the BAFTA Awards for Best Film, Best Direction and Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Scott Thomas. The film's success propelled Hugh Grant to international stardom, particularly in the United States. In 1999, Four Weddings and a Funeral was placed 23rd on the British Film Institute's 100 Greatest British Films of the 20th Century. In 2016, Empire magazine ranked it 21st in their list of the 100 best British films. As of 2017, a poll of 150 actors, directors, writers, producers and critics for Time Out magazine ranked it 74th best British film of all time. Curtis reunited with director Newell and the surviving cast for the 25th anniversary comic relief short entitled One Red-Nosed Day and a Wedding, which aired in the UK during Red Nose Day on the 15th of March 2019. Screenwriter Richard Curtis's own experience as a wedding attendee inspired Four Weddings and a Funeral. According to Curtis, he began writing the script at the age of 34, after realizing he had attended 65 weddings in a 11-year period. At one wedding, he was propositioned by a fellow guest, but he turned her down and forever regretted it. Accordingly, he based the origin of Charles and Carrie's romance on that situation. It took Curtis 17 drafts to reach the final version. He commented on director Mike Newell's influence. "I come from a school where making it funny is what matters. Mike was obsessed with keeping it real. Every character, no matter how small, has a story, not just 3 funny lines. It's a romantic film about love and friendship that swims in a sea of jokes." Curtis chose to omit any mention of the characters' careers because he didn't think a group of friends would realistically discuss their jobs while together at a wedding. Curtis, Newell and the producers began the casting process for Four Weddings in early 1992. Alex Jennings was cast as Charles, but funding for the production fell through in mid-1992. Jennings would eventually go on to play a supporting role in Mindy Kalin's 2019 television miniseries adaptation of the film. The team continued holding auditions for over a year, seeing roughly 70 actors before the role of Charles was given to Hugh Grant. Grant was ready to give up acting as a career when he received the script for Four Weddings and a Funeral. He stated in 2016, "I wasn't really getting work at all at the time, and then to my great surprise the script came through the letterbox from my agent and was really good. And I rang on and said there must be a mistake. You've sent me a good script," he would say. Initially, Richard Curtis, who had modelled the character of Charles after himself, was opposed to casting Grant in the role because he thought Grant was too handsome. Curtis favoured casting Alan Rickman, but Rickman refused to audition. Curtis was eventually persuaded by Newell and the producers to approve Grant's casting. Jeanne Tripplehorn was originally cast as Carrie, but she had to drop out before filming because her mother had died. The role was then offered to Marissa Tomei, but she turned it down because her grandfather was sick at the time. Something later she would go on to say, "I greatly regret." Sarah Jessica Parker was also reportedly considered. Andie MacDowell was in London doing publicity for Groundhog Day when she read the script and subsequently was cast. MacDowell took a 75% cut in her fee to appear, receiving $250,000 up front, but due to the success of the film, she earned $3 million after all. Grant's participation hit another stumbling block when his agent requested a £5,000 rise over the £35,000 salary Grant was offered. The producers initially refused because of the extremely tight budget, but eventually agreed. The supporting cast members were paid £17,500 apiece. Pre-production for the movie was a long process because the funding was erratic, falling through in mid-1992 and leading to much uncertainty. Finally, in the early days of 1993, Working Title Films stepped in to close the gap. Nonetheless, another $1.2 million was cut just before production began in summer of 1993, forcing the film to be made in just 36 days, with a final budget of £2.7 million. The budget was so tight that the extras had to wear their own wedding clothes, while Rowan Atkinson appeared as a vicar on 2 of the weddings so production wouldn't have to pay another actor. To make Grant look more nerdy, the producers styled him with shaggy hair, glasses and deliberately unflattering, ill-fitting clothes. Grant was encouraged by director Mike Newell to mess up and trip over his lines, written in convoluted syntax, as Grant describes them, in order to give Charles a stammering, nervous quality. Grant, who struggled with hay fever throughout filming, was unsure of Newell's direction and his own performance, which he thought was atrocious. Regarding Newell, Grant commented that he seemed to be giving direction against what I thought were the natural beats of the comedy. He was making a film with texture, grounding it, and playing the truths rather than the gags. According to Hugh Grant, the initial screening of the rough cut for 4 Weddings and the Funeral went very badly. He would say, "I thought we screwed it up." The film was met with lots of objection in the United States due to its explicit language and sexual content. They particularly objected to the opening scene in the movie in which Charles and Scarlett say the word fuck over and over. After an initial screening of the movie in Salt Lake City led the conservative Mormon members of the city council to walk out. Accordingly, Mike Newell and the actors agreed to reshoot the scene with the British swear word bugger being used in the American version. The executives also objected to the title, believing 4 Weddings and a Funeral would turn off male viewers from the film. In its place, they suggested titles such as True Love and Near Misses, Loitering in Sacred Places, Skulking Around, and Rolling in the Aisles, none of which were accepted. The movie also featured the soundtrack of popular songs, including the cover version of the Troggs' Love Is All Around, performed by Wet Wet Wet, that remained at number 1 on the UK singles chart for 15 weeks. Now look, this is one of those films that really is a true British comedy classic. But there are unfortunately parts that haven't really dated as well. Look, don't get me wrong, this is a truly enjoyable film, and it's one of those films that you could easily watch over and over again. Hugh Grant delivers a really stand-up performance here as the bubbling yet lovable Charles. Although I won't lie, I never really felt he meant it when he was swearing in the film. It just came off sort of misplaced. Kristin Scott Thomas and John Hannah really add depth and humour to the story, and John Hannah recites The Funeral Blues, a poem by British-American poet W.H. Auden, absolutely beautifully. Simon Callow here as Gareth also is a standout in this film. The film is also known for its clever and often self-deprecating humour. Richard Curtis, the screenwriter, infuses the script with witty dialogue and situational comedy that really resonates with audiences. The humour is really a mix of British wit and universal themes. I just wish they'd used Rowan Atkinson a little bit more as well. Look, when you consider this film was made in such a small budget and such a small time frame, the cinematography and the weddings are beautifully shot, and the pacing in the film keeps the audience engaged, and the use of London as a backdrop adds to the film's charm, providing a sort of picturesque setting for the unfolding romantic escapades. I also feel the film explores the complexities of love, friendship and commitment, and it does it with a sort of sincerity and heart. The romantic elements are both sweet and realistic, and they avoid cliches and offer a more nuanced perspective on real relationships. Look, sometimes the story can be somewhat predictable, and key events can be somewhat formulaic. And some of the characters did come across as somewhat one-dimensional, with limited exploration of their backgrounds or motivations. I did, however, feel the ending was somewhat rushed, as we kind of just end with the big romantic kiss and suddenly it's all done. And one thing I must mention within the film is Andie MacDowell's performance here as Carrie. She's the female lead, but I found her delivery to be less dynamic compared to the rest of the cast, and there also didn't seem to be the best chemistry between her and Hugh Grant. Look, in some ways the film has dated. The story's simple and predictable, and yet on the other hand, it also could be seen as a delightful and timeless romantic comedy that combines humour, romance and genuine emotion. It's fundamentally a well-crafted plot, some fantastic characters and very clever dialogue, and it most certainly paved the way for a successful career for Hugh Grant and established Richard Curtis as a prominent writer within the genre. Although, like I said, I feel the film is somewhat dated by today's standards, it's still a most enjoyable romantic comedy. However, I do feel films like Notting Hill were much better within the genre. But look, this is a light, easy film. It really won't demand too much of yourself, and it's a good way to pass the time. 4 Weddings and a Funeral gets an 8.5 out of 10.